him, maybe not virtually, so maybe just a conference call. Sure. But he didn't want to do that.
Well, as long as he's willing to do it, we're willing to do that. So we actually want to go through. Yeah. So if it's appropriate at some point, we should just announce all of the oral talks to be on sort of program.
I would think that's reasonable to, especially after. I mean, we would think about it.
I'm only going to talk for about 8 minutes or something to show the tool and planning tool that make decision makers. I'll make that side.
I think Terry would certainly think those should be present. They would likely regret it.
Sure. In fact, if I do that, I'll ask Terry to just make talk about it.
I sent her an email last week about this meeting. When we get Michelle's going to present on the execution plan. I told her specifically that economic development partners. I'll send you the document if you want. I'll send you this.
There's Michelle Doran. Hi, Michelle Doran. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
More famous after today, right?
Or yes.
All right. It's hotter here than Tucson, really.
Oh, yes.
You can't hardly tell.
We were down in the Dallas yesterday. You could tell if there was about 8 to 10 degrees difference. It's favorable.
The donut is favorably 10 degrees better. Yeah, 10 degrees. Well, the difference between 100 and 110 is a significant difference.
Yeah, look at it.
Well, I can steady progress. Oh, did you guys read Tim Graber's comment about the thickness of the document? I wasn't quite sure how to interpret what he meant by it. Well, he said it was about as thick as his Gutenberg Bible or whatever he calls it.
186 pages now? Is that what it is? 187? What is it?
Well, the actual document is now 189, but you add all of the appended insights. Whoever looks at it.
Well, I just appreciate the fact that you were contributing to making it 3 pages or less, because those are the ways that I can read.
Well, and what we've decided to do really is kind of split off the executive summary and let that be almost a standalone document.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And use it as use the other one as
and there's somebody who really wants detailed information. Okay.
Well, we're not. I kind of don't like this.
we do good stuff. That's our mission.
Yeah, exactly. And we plan to continue doing good stuff. Yeah, well, they certainly are getting a boatload of it. But you may make that comment too, that we're on a push to split it apart and even then still simplify it. Yeah, I have to confess, I cannot get myself to get all the way through it. And that's not good. I mean, if the authors of it can't get through it, there's clearly something wrong.
But I couldn't tell because we just talked about it so much. All the aspects that it feels like this is keeping on new stuff.
Right?
I never read it. Versus.
I never read it. I just figure it would show up.
You would not be in the minority of one then.
But we really do live in a PowerPoint soundbite world sometimes.
And we started out that way before. But even before.
As an educator, are you worried that cultural change changes the fundamental nature of intellectualism?
It's got to be. I don't know.
Very good. There's no nuance.
Certainly not the problem.
Yeah, absolutely.
I said that my daughter now is also into
it's not, searched as much, cited as much.
So then she would show up in something. They say, oh my gosh, you know,
seemingly kind of peripheral or unrelated connections actually wind up carrying a lot more than they do they would find. Well, yeah, once I started talking to college down there, they had 4 or 5 I didn't know this. Broadband is clean technology. How? You work out of your home, you're not driving. Okay. So that's just one element. We can certainly find a lot more. We will grow Arizona. They can try to use it for chunk. In fact, before we moved down here, living in Sedona, we had to make just for the standpoint of shopping. We made 2 to 3 trips to Phoenix every day, and then even just shopping in Sedona, it's a 20-minute drive to the nearest supermarket where we're going. That's a substantial round trip, just to shop groceries.
Yes, no judge at the time. The program director for FinTech Challenge. FinTech Challenge of coordinating
There's a new conversation now. I just saw it on the news the other night. Because of the low cost of producing gas now, fracking. That's kind of shifted the whole economic dialogue around technology. So there are those voices who are saying, well, wait a second, why are we making these investments as rapidly as that? Of course, the pro people are coming back and saying, hey, it's a long-term thing, and you need to do that now. Yes. Yeah. So there's all kinds of hello. See you again. I'm Bill. Last 2 days we do talking partnership. Yeah. I mean, and Rich. Yeah. I've been reading 2 or 3 years ago about this. High voltage, essentially, that vaporizer makes turns it back into slag or gaseous material. And it's got a huge point of America and all the science. And I think it's sort of just disappeared on the table. They were actually running scale-up plant in Europe. It was industrial. I mean, well, you take mixed refuse of any kind and they zap it somehow in this enclosed chamber. And stuff that is meltable, heavy metal, glass, and so forth, stuff like that, moves to the bottom of the chamber and recoverable. And then the gaseous material, the vaporized, separated out through a distillation process. And separated into various valuable components and useful, including some of the gaseous material to be used to then continue to cycle the process. The other day, my wife and I were talking about it. We both just love the technology, but nothing's responsible for it. And it just seems to disappear. And I need to go back and look through some searching. Cuts up
fuel, right, on one side. I read about that. But this is supported with this trust. Yeah. That contact with you. Overwhelm me with the material that I talked to next week. Well, I'm just going to run your video.
Trying to get on my, okay, I know it's going to work. It's fine. For the dump drive.
Yeah. Yeah, fine. Now, let me show you the new mic we got up there. It's really nice. You redo that. Yeah, I'm going to be here.
I just scrolled myself to go.
You got this. He and his stuff, the things I don't want to hear, we'll trade all my goes in there. Yeah. Jeffrey, you look up, the whole list is very and one of my buckets. And still understand started about scale. Instead of rolling 4 years, now I'm rolling libraries that are available for coming from the hey, they're doing, you need this class, you were in anywhere. You stand up to the class and provide a way to show that you learn the material, here is it, and also I'll tell you a little story. I was at the U of A where they have a Native American law. That's your first problem. That's your first problem.
I know, but this is your reaction. I know something else.
Can tell them your second.
You know, what would it be like if you officially let students learn something there's somebody else to find out.
Yeah.
And it's incompetency.
Well, I think there's a different thing. It's a question of if you have content. Is there a where your domain experts get to participate in? Do you increase your enrollment or your participation?
That too. Even that simple question of, breaking a curriculum, legislation, drawing outside the standards.
Very reasonable, that's the way
Yeah,
people
yeah,
want it.
that idea.
People work once they're outside of it.
I think the world has shifted incredibly.
Yeah, I know.
And like what? Yeah. So I'm also planning to
Yeah, that'd be great. I would look that up because I was probably
well, I have a lot of time in my hands, so I can. So these are very. I spent a lot of time.
And I'm just the CIO.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to couple
Anyway, it's,
I think what they do in the future. Yeah, well, there's a couple of them already. But they will the entire content. Okay. So it's easy for them to show up for class. Largely going on. When they don't come for class, that means sort of people want for a community and what are you but if you're not careful, this is a byproduct. So that's the deal. How many of your clients don't like leveraging all these social media, not the classic stuff. You turn around and you say, I don't remember it. Where the value is showing up in your job. Three really cool things about those three people, and you have to present those three people. And it's like, go look them up, go find out, and tell some stories. Yeah, and you all know that. Yeah, how you doing? Better, man. Yeah. Well, they have me on the ICU. That's I'm not sure
So glad you called. We're here when you need a little extra help. Did you check out the complete list of do-it-yourself fixes on our website? Go to help.cableone.net. If you can't find what you're looking for online, there's a friendly Cable One support person ready to help you. We'll be right back. Love to do it yourself? At help.cableone.net, you'll find guides and troubleshooting tips you can easily take care of on your own without a service call. Learn how to set up voicemail or sign up to pay your bills online. It's secure and saves you valuable time.
Those who are on remotely, if you could press the mute button so we can start it, please. Thank you.
Support. You get it with Cable One. We're always happy to provide you with service solutions by phone. Or feel free to browse the complete list of do-it-yourself fixes on help.cableone.net. Our website is available for you whenever you need help, any time of the day or night.
How are you? Hey, good. I'm Brad. Yeah. Oh, big Brad. How are you, sir? Good. How are you, Brad? Part of the deal.
Like spend $500,000 for it.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
Well, my problem is,
Here's the right people working out.
Quick questions? You'll find step-by-step guides online at help.cableone.net. From how to connect with our pay-per-view service to activating parental controls. Just click on the support topic that's right for you. So glad you called. We're here when you need a little extra help. Did you check out the complete list of do-it-yourself fixes on our website? Go to help.cableone.net. If you can't find what you're looking for online, there's a friendly Cable One support person ready to help you. We'll be right back. Love to do it yourself? At help.cableone.net, you'll find guides and troubleshooting tips you can easily take care of on your own without a service call. Learn how to set up voicemail or sign up to pay your bills online. It's secure and saves you valuable time. Support. You get it with Cable One. We're always happy to provide you with service solutions by phone. Or feel free to browse the complete list of do-it-yourself fixes on help.cableone.net. Our website is available for you whenever you need help, any time of the day or night. If you can't find what you're looking for online, we'll be right back to help you figure it out. When it comes to service, we do everything we can to get you back online fast. We know how important it is to keep in touch, to know what's going on, and we appreciate your visit. Visit help.cableone.net to take advantage of all the great communication tools we have to offer. Together, we grow, learn, and stay connected. Quick questions? You'll find step-by-step guides online at help.cableone.net. From how to connect with our pay-per-view service to activating parental controls. Just click on the support topic that's right for you. So glad you called. We're here when you need a little extra help. check out the complete list of do-it-yourself fixes on our website, go to help.cable1.net. If you can't find what you're looking for online, there's a friendly Cable One support person ready to help you. We'll be right back. Love to do it yourself? At help.cable1.net, you'll find guides and troubleshooting tips you can easily take care of on your own without a service call. Learn how to set up voicemail or sign up to pay your bills online. It's secure and saves you valuable time. Support. You get it with Cable One. We're always happy to provide you with service solutions by phone. Or feel free to browse the complete list of do-it-yourself fixes on help.cable1.net. Our website is available for you whenever you need help, any time of the day or night. If you can't find what you're looking for online, we'll be right back to help you figure it out. When it comes to service, we do everything we can to get you back online fast. We know how important it is to keep in touch, to know what's going on, and we appreciate your business. Visit help.cable1.net to take advantage of all the great communication tools we have to offer. Together, we grow, learn, and stay connected.
The conference has been muted.
got that, and then about the third time it went over. Yeah, see, it'll come up there. Mike, how are you, man? I found it, and I'm already doing it. I can never be optimistic. The last time, you guys we'll go anywhere they let us go. You know, you got to start getting things that change, right? I'm talking to actual Don't make me use the hammer. I really don't like using the hammer. Yeah, we get a velvet one next time. Good morning, everybody. How's it going? Good. Thank you for braving the heat. It's a wee bit warm out there lately. We got a full agenda as always with this meeting. So let's go ahead and get into it. Call this meeting to order. The very first agenda item is sorry. So we got a task group update, and we're going to ask Michelle Norn to come up and give a presentation on the strategic plan. Yeah. Oh yeah. Can I? Let's do a roll call on the phone.
The conference has been unmuted.
This is Damon Wood with Airband.
Thanks, Dan. Damon.
Jeremy Graves with Valley Telecom.
Thank you.
Brett Estrella from Northern Arizona University.
David Couture with Unisource Energy. Jody Filardo with Town of Clarkdale.
Thank you.
Okay, Advanced Tech.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Deborah Dupay, Advanced Tech Solutions.
Thank you.
Alan Brozier, cardiologist.
Thank you, Alan. Anyone else on the phone? Okay. With that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Michelle to give us an update on the strategic plan.
Thanks, Gary. I'm the CIO at the University of Arizona, and my primary purpose today is to represent the Strategic Planning Task Force and provide you. Do I need to go loud? Okay. How's that? Better? Okay. So I'm going to provide you with a little bit of a meatier update today than in the past. Okay. So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive. But before I go there, I'd like to ask the task force members to stand up for me. So all those who've been helping with our strategic plan, please stand up.
Brad, on your feet.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are more people in the background, but these are the folks that are part of the strategic planning task force in combination with our planning consultants who have really put a lot of time into creating a plan that really needs to, in the end, be advocated for and represented by this Digital Arizona Council. So this is not work on behalf of the Strategic Planning Group. This ultimately needs to become a plan that this council can support. So the recommendations that we make, the actions that we state, the context for our actions, at some point we're going to ask for acceptance of this plan. We're not going to do that necessarily today in total. We are going to try to pick it apart as we go. And so today, what we're going to cover is we're going to zero in on the recommendations and the action items. Now, I've been alluding to these recommendations for the last several updates, but we're going to go through them in great detail today, as well as the action items. The executive summary and the action items, recommendations and action items, were distributed beforehand to give you an opportunity to spend some time reading through it, coming up to speed on some of the things that we're talking about. Now, what I show you here is the table of contents in the plan, and you will be glad that we did not distribute the plan, because the plan is about like that. So we thought we'd chunk it down and start with some snippets. And so we're going to zero in on these items right here, our recommendations, and then the action items that we've identified support those recommendations. And what I'd like to do is go through all of them, and I'm not going to go through every single line, but I want to get through all of them first, and then we'll loop back around and we'll use the rest of our time for discussion and questions, because we really want a conversation today. We want some feedback. We want to hear your thoughts, what looks good, or we have gaps, you don't like the wording here, what does this mean? All of us are prepared to address those today as best we can within the time that we have set for us, which is about 45 minutes. Okay, so are we ready? Let's go. Okay, so I wanted to highlight some of the key contextual elements to the plan so far. There's a lot of context right now in the fully fledged plan, but these are some of the key messages that we've been debating, honing in on, collecting, that I think are context for the recommendations and the actions. So one of our key contextual items is the fact that we want to approach our broadband needs in the state, our network infrastructure needs in the state from a partnership perspective. And so that's partnership with all involved, government, private industry, education. I mean, I think this council represents that partnership well, and that we have a variety of aspects, a variety of perspectives at the table, hopefully with a common goal to think about our network infrastructure for the state of Arizona going forward. And so we highlight that in this plan as a context. And so even though we're grappling through the wording and what might be said in a particular way, we fall back to this to remind ourselves that we're all in this together. So that's an important message going forward, and to keep that in mind going forward. The other key message here, and this comes out in one of the recommendations, is the need to really think about this as a partnership and come at it from a variety of ways. One might be removing barriers. That could be a policy barrier. It could be a practice barrier. It could be that we recognize from a governmental perspective we need to think about how to leverage resources, whatever that might look like. It could be driven by market demands. There are a lot of factors involved there that we need to deal with, encourage, to really facilitate the public-private partnership and the investment. Because I don't think any one entity can make the investment in total. It's going to take a combination of investment. And so how we do that and how we approach that is going to be important as we move forward. Another item that's worth pointing out is that we debated this quite a bit in our group, and maybe it'll come up today. There's been a lot of talk about unserved, underserved, rural areas, urban areas. But in the end, this is about the state of Arizona and every citizen in Arizona having appropriate, adequate connectivity. And that could be a person in the home, it could be a business, a school, whatever that looks like. But it's Arizona in total. Knowing we have different sets of constituencies and gaps and a lot here have not. But in the end, it really is about Arizona. So that's a key message to keep in mind going forward. And then finally, or maybe at this point in time, worth noting, that the primary strategy is really to enable our partners. And in this case, it could be, it's our private sector partners. It's anyone who feels they can contribute to this model. We want to enable that. But the acknowledgement that because no one entity can make the total investment, it's going to take a variety of roles. It's going to take a role by government, by local city councils, or whatever that needs to look like. Okay? But we want to enable. We want to create an enabling environment. Okay, so these are the key messages. So what are the recommendations? We sort of wrote this down in some key areas. First of all, one of our recommendations is that we really need to facilitate the build-out of the infrastructure. And in cooperation. And that's to those points I just made, that when you think about how we consider moving forward, one way is we've got to get the infrastructure in the ground. And so one key aspect of our plan is that we need to facilitate that. We need to facilitate the build-out. And we'll go through ways that we think we can do that through the action. Another recommendation is to increase the adoption and usage of the infrastructure. So just because you have a wire in the wall may not mean anything if you don't have a computer to use it. So we feel strongly that we need to include some action items, put some time spent around, after you have the jack in the wall, a really fast jack in the wall, we need to think about how to enable people to use it with computers or training programs or things like that. And so we'll talk a little bit about what some of those activities are. Leadership plays a key role here, so we decided to call that out specifically. I think this council is an example of that, and so we'll talk through what some of those elements look like in terms of governance and leadership. Another key aspect or maybe driving factor is planning and economic development. So a lot of times when you hear people talk about the need for more capacity, they talk about the economic impact of having high-speed infrastructure. And so what does that really mean? Now, we agree that that's a factor here. and that we need to call that out as a specific recommendation. So we'll talk through what some of those actions are. Outreach, again, it's kind of coupled with adoption. If you have a good, robust, pervasive infrastructure, you want to promote it to use. And so how we do that, with whom, working with local governments, policies, outreach programs, we decided to make that a specific recommendation. Now, in terms of the infrastructure itself, we also call out several layers that sit on top of the infrastructure. One is education and job readiness. I think we've heard Mark Masterson talk about the fact that we have to have high-speed connectivity in our schools. It is not a choice anymore. We have to have that connectivity in our schools. And so we recommend implementing the underlying technologies, support the curricula, goes beyond just the network in this particular recommendation. It does move into things like training and things like that for our teachers and instructors. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But we feel strongly that we need a recommendation to call that out in this plan. Same with healthcare. We all know that environment's changing. Whatever we do as a state will support, maybe even enable, leapfrog what gets done in the healthcare arena. And so we'll talk through some of the actions that we've identified there. Advanced research, we want our infrastructure to catalyze and enable an environment of discovery and research. We have a lot of that going on now, but again, to be successful in the 21st century, you've got to have a robust network so that you can share data and collaborate, as we've done in the research realm. Another key aspect is public safety. This tends to be a very high item driving factor for broadband infrastructure. People are all over the state, somebody gets hurt, they need 911 services, you've got to have connectivity for that stuff, to get emergency personnel there. And we'll talk a little bit about what the actions are, but we want to align with those actions that are already taking place in that space right now. We want to align with that. So we'll talk about our recommended actions for doing that. And then finally, maybe a little bit of a new element here is the idea of green energy, the environment, how we might leverage the infrastructure to advocate or facilitate moving in that direction as well. And we'll talk through some of the actions to support that particular recommendation. And I would invite, by the way, my co-planners to definitely jump in if you think I'm missing.
Michelle, let me just say on advanced research, so much often focuses on the have-nots and the bottom end, but we really ought, Blair Levin presented at this last meeting, there really is a case to be made that you can't ignore the really top end, the high performance computing, the biology that's happening, and the kind of Internet 2 and Lambda Rail and other telepresence. And so we really got Blair Levin involved when he was here in working with us offline on that and developed a concept of gigabit development zones like economic development zones. But I just wanted to emphasize that we're trying to have some vision for the highest performance end as well as the least common denominator.
That's a good point, Mark, and it drives it home even more when you talk about that high-end research like that. I deal with this on my own campus. A key success factor is their ability to move data around very quickly. The high images coming down off of the Mars mission,
right.
Well, you got to have bandwidth of that stuff. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, so let's go a little bit deeper here. I got to watch my time. You're going to kick me when I get close, right? Okay. And I'll move quickly. I'm not going to go through all these, but just so you get a feel for the action items, this is the build-out. Okay, so these are the actions that we feel we need to take to facilitate the infrastructure itself. Some of this we've done already, like the legislative bills that were passed to allow for conduit in the ground alongside highways. So when we build now, not only are we going to put a highway and we're going to put the network highway in there as well. And so it's doing things like that. We want to upgrade and provision the infrastructure in a most cost-effective manner, and again, that's through partnership, so that we're all sharing in the cost. Actions like sharing and leveraging current resources and investments like antennas or pole rights or whatever that is. We want to be able to offer that up and point to those as an action. Let's see. This is the rights of way. I know rights of way I've seen that as a theme in other plans and discussions that I've been involved in, that this actually is a key barrier where that process alone is barrier enough to keep people from making the investment. So how can we make that better? We want to be able to focus on that and make some improvements there. And then develop and pursue funding sources and mechanisms such as grants or digital capacity. So even though we all might be sharing in an investment, are there other sources of investment that we can go after or models that we should look at to help facilitate the funding? Okay, increased adoption. I talked a little bit about this. This is the recommendation where not only do you have your network, but we want you to use it. And so some of the actions that we are putting forth here deal with things like special programs around equipment, ways that we can get equipment into homes maybe that can't afford equipment, working with communities in terms of training programs or workshop programs to promote their community members to use the equipment, to learn how to use the equipment. Ralph.
Michelle, when we were at the conference in Dallas, Texas, the Rural Telecom Conference, that was when the bill was passed that the governor signed, and we mentioned it to some of the federal people about the fact that Arizona had given the right-of-way. We were told at the time that they were looking into it, and we believed that because of Arizona's lead in putting the conduit along the highway, that the federal government has now put out a decree that they will also allow conduit along federal rights of way.
And accelerate cross-jurisdictional.
Yeah.
One of the big federal problems is you go from federal parkland, BL, Bureau of Land Management, to one continent and another. So there was an executive order from the White House that we viewed very synergistically with our own efforts.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think any way that the federal government can convey these same messages and best practices, it's to the benefit of all of us. So write your letters, right? And we'll wait for them to build it.
Absolutely. It isn't a done deal yet. And actually, the NTIA in the report to Congress gave 2 illustrations of state programs. This quarter, it was a quarterly report to Congress, but the Arizona SB 1402, its passage and its impact, was one of the NTIA's 2 stories to Congress.
Great. Okay, some of the other activities, we're trying to call out the digital divide aspect here. Affordability is a key factor in really trying to increase the adoption and use. And so we have example actions here around some particular programs, and there's a little bit more detail even still in the plan that we're working through that would say specifically, well, what do we mean by remove barriers for reuse? That would really hone in on that. But for the moment, it's promoting these kinds of creative programs to get equipment into the hands where they can use it and be able to learn how to use it in a way that's comfortable and easy. Okay, leadership. I talked a little bit about this. Clearly, one of the actions that we're including is to continue with this group. We're kind of there already, so we've achieved something already in it. We want to be able to work with local governments, for example, to establish maybe similar kinds of councils, to think about their local areas, to loop in their plans with our strategic plan. So if we set a good context at a state level, they should be able to take our plan and then think about that next level in their areas. And so how can we help them do that in promoting the establishment of their own little governance structures that was in line up to what we're doing at the state. We want to work with the Arizona Corporation Commission to evolve the Universal Service Fund program or model in a way that will support what we're trying to do within our plan. Those are probably the key ones here. The other key one here is the work of the asset office, which is I got my 15-minute signal. Okay, so leveraging the current governmental agencies that are currently in play, Aaron's office, et cetera, to move this forward. Okay, I'm gonna go fast. Planning and economic development. I think the key here is to come up with the evidence that truly shows economic development. And so these are the ways that we're suggesting we move forward here. We always say business increases when you have higher net worth. How can we show that through dollars in this program so that we have our evidence to show the impact? That's the point of these actions. Outreach, I talked about this. I think it's consulting, marketing programs, making sure people realize what the plan is, what's involved, involved consulting on planning and proposals and things like that. Education and jobs. I'm not going to go too far into this. I know we've talked about this quite a bit here, actually. I'll just say that, I'll use an example to maybe provide a context for these actions. My high school right now where my kids go, every class they have, their teachers put their syllabus and their assignments out in Moodle. Well, Moodle, somehow we couldn't get to the site. And we were all panicking because there was no alternative to getting to those materials. So, as an example, we're kind of getting there, but we've got to create an infrastructure to allow for that kind of activity in our schools. And so these actions are designed to try to promote that. Access to the digital curricula is the action item that would facilitate home access to school materials. Training programs for teachers is another example where they need to feel comfortable that they know how to use the technology.
So Michelle,
yeah.
And I know this is meant to be high level, but from a Department of Education concern, FY 14, we have to deploy an online test, and we can't. And it's going to be expensive to do it in two ways. This flat out means bandwidth. I would like to see if some of this we need a specific goal.
Okay.
That says PARC, that's Arizona College and Career Ready. Exam cannot be deployed in the current world.
What does that mean exactly? I mean, you don't have bandwidth to the home?
No, it's to schools. Right? It's be online and it'll all be concurrent. And it's short bursts, but it's going to be during that testing cycle. Because of how we lock down this test, it's a high-stakes test. It's 4 high-stakes tests per year. It's not just 1 anymore. It's going to go to 4 high-stakes tests in college, in high school, and 3 in lower level. So this high-stakes test determines whether that child can move.
So a legislative requirement for you is to display a test that you don't have to currently.
Roughly.
But what you're saying is we need to add a goal in here, right? Or a more specific
we have to make our way to, or we do it manual paper. And it's not the purpose of this test is performance-based testing. It's not the same old matching anymore. They have to perform in the test. They have to show they can actually do the skill. This is part of rolling out the whole new Common Core educational system that this state is in the middle of rolling out. This is not just this state. This is the United States. 24 states are using PARC. The other 26 are using Smarter Balance. Similar philosophies, but it's now national. And this is going to impact us. we cannot do the same on a, and I don't want to derail this meeting, it's very important. I just think that there needs to be some specific things in here that everybody's aware, because this gives you legislative, I mean, this is going to give us some reasons why this is important. Now, another thing in another couple pages earlier, where I would recommend what George has done, and they did a consolidated E-rate, and they made 3 megabits to every school. Every school had 3 megabits. And they're doing online testing already, just because they're more advanced than ours. But there's got to be, I know that the legislature doesn't have a pocket full of cash. I mean, I understand the situation the state's in, but we've got to look for alternatives and a concerted effort that will also benefit everything else we're doing. Because if I get it to a zone, other people can plug in.
Okay, so I made a note about those 2 items.
Sorry.
No, this is what we want. I mean, if you think there needs to be additional information in here, more specificity, all for that. So we'll work with you on, after to figure out how to get that represented in here. So I think those are important. So I made notes of those. Other comments before I move on? Okay, there are more action items. This is our longest one. And so I won't go through these. I think I'll move on to the next one. But there are a lot of actions relative to the education and jobs recommendation. Healthcare, I think the old context here is to create an e-health ecosystem or telehealth ecosystem. And so these are some suggested actions for how to do this. Things like even implementing a shared vision and a strategy with the healthcare community and with this council, I think are important. Building out, we have a telemedicine program. Continue to build that out, expand it, modernize it, whatever that needs to look like. And then increase the availability and use of e-health applications. I think those things are going to happen. I think we're just going to need to maybe get ourselves caught up a little bit and maybe even ahead. Comment?
Dr. Pitt, this is not my place, but I've been thinking about you a lot on this one. Obamacare is, the cost, and I'm not making a play against it, but the cost, this is going to help us leverage our costs, no matter what somebody's paying. And if we don't do something like this, the cost for rural areas is going to be prohibited.
Yeah, I just got back from Minnesota talking to the Rural Provider Organization for the Fed about some ACO or Obama, what you call Obamacare, value-based care, basically requires that disparate organizations follow an individual patient in a borderless way without walls. And so there are going to be requirements similar to your testing requirement where providers are able to manage data across walls that they currently don't have. And those are going to be business drivers that are, all of a sudden we can turn around and say, okay, I got to connect with, and it's not going to work.
Also, we're at last year's telehealth symposium, we heard stories from Banner and other providers that the ability to monitor people in their home led to much reduced rates of the recurrence of their conditions and then going back into the hospital, that the electronic enablement basically improved the quality of care outside the hospital. And the hospitals now are often paid on a per incident, a heart attack or this or that, no matter how many times the person comes back to the hospital. So they also have the incentive to control costs. So that home health monitoring over broadband becomes an increasingly valuable and ROI-specific matter.
The government will penalize hospitals that have a high recidivism. So therefore, it is to their benefit to monitor and keep them in the home. People that come back to the hospital normally come back with higher incidence of illness because not taking medication or not being monitored. So staying in the home is cost effective, both from the hospital and from the overall health standpoint.
Good point. Further actions around healthcare, I'll keep going. Advanced research, we talked about this. I think one of the key actions is to continue the work with GigU and Blair Levin and those, the notion to create and expand those gigabit zones, show the positive impact, and then show how we might extend that out, so that we can, truly support the high-end research, which is in some cases is related to healthcare and medicine.
Plus, it's a huge economic development.
Right. Public safety. These actions are related to the, integrating with the work that's been started through the FirstNet, right? FirstNet program, which is federal funding, to essentially build out a public safety network throughout the United States. And I think what's important is the recognition of involving the agencies that are in play around this, like the Public Safety Interoperable Communications Agency, in terms of their work as it relates to this council, but also in sharing infrastructure. So I think a new concept, at least from my perspective, and I'm new to that conversation, but I think a key is recognizing that they're not going to have enough money to build out the infrastructure all themselves, just like we've been saying. And so how do we leverage infrastructure that we already have in place in partnership with that without jeopardizing the requirement for, a dedicated something to that environment? How do we leverage and share? And so we've been able to draw that in through the work of Michael Britt and his connection to start to bring these two paths closer together. Not all the way there yet, but closer together, and these actions are a reflection of that.
Michelle, inside ASDAC, you've effectively merged the conversations about public safety broadband and digital design.
Great. So they all sit in the same office. Oh. I know.
And then Galen takes
okay,
it down.
You're snoring, Galen.
Energy and environment. I think this is the last one. Okay. Not a lot of actions around here, but I think this is a good way for us to get started. And it's thinking as a state. Promoting the notion of things like, teleworkers or working from home, remote working, having infrastructure to support that, having as much information on the web as possible, services on the web, so people can do things without having to come down to an office to get them done or to a service center to get them done. And then the notion of the smart grid, of monitoring energy consumption through every single thing in your house, your light bulbs and your heaters and your appliances, a lot of activity going on there right now. And so as those things start to become available for consumers, it's going to put pressure on having an infrastructure.
So if your house goes dark, you use up your quota.
You're done. You're done for this. Okay, and so I'll open it up to conversation now or discussion. Some feedback. What do you guys think? Tom?
So first of all, my hats off to you for coming up with so many different items, so many different areas. The flip to that is it's almost mind-numbingly long.
Right.
And to me, so much of it is covering all the bases that everybody's been participating in, that it's like a laundry list of all the goodness, of which a big chunk of it is easy for me to critique because I didn't have to do this. So let's be clear, I understand that. But it's leverage and develop and should and those kinds of things versus actionable things, more like what you were saying. Do this, do that. And I believe for us to be successful, we're going to have to come down to a handful of the must-have, do-haves versus the long list of making sure everybody's got their. And some people aren't going to be happy with what's settled on. unless you guys have the staffing and the ability to deal with 70 things in 10 areas.
So, Michelle, just in response, part of our strategy is that these aren't all action items for DAC or asset. Most of them in, let's say, the health arena or the education arena, we've identified things we think should be happening or must happen based on evolution, but we've also named and talked about the stakeholders, being the Department of Ed, or they may choose to adopt and drive these things or not, but I think you're finding many of them at the table. I just wanted to discriminate the strategic plan. We understand in some ways looks to boil the ocean, has a lot of stuff, but when you look through it, some things are meant to be owned by the council or asset or some of the core players here, and other things are really guideposts for other stakeholder groups.
And there will be a tactical plan that follows on the heels of this that will do the kinds of things you're talking about, it will say.
So I'll make one last comment. Again, I'm complimenting you, so please don't take it any other way. But if you have 70, there's 68 strategic, if you have a tactical plan with 5 or 10 things under each one of those, it's going to be totally undoable.
That way,
and this group of various forms over the years has struggled to get something done for years and years. So all I'm suggesting is that we pick some very, very vital things and focus on.
So if you cut me on this arm, I bleed green from drinking too much Mountain Dew. If you cut me on this arm, I bleed blue from living at Intel. So I absolutely agree. The way I look at this now is now we know what the universe is. Now we need to take this to executive leadership and have them prioritize it. Because it's important not for us just to own this, it's important for our leadership to own this as well. And I think with that, then we can help to start getting traction. But I've got this slide that I use in my presentations all the time, and it's a picture of Katrina. And it's a picture from a helicopter looking out over the levee where the levee broke and spilled out over into the communities. That's what we have. We have digital levees all over the place, right? And what we need to do is we need to document what those levees are, create a plan of action for each of those things, and it has to be smart. It has to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, right? And so that's absolutely the thing that I've been challenging my team is, okay, you guys got a great strategic plan, you got a great framework, now make it actionable. I'm going to give a little bit of an update in a little bit that'll kind of bring us back into full circle with some of that stuff as well.
Those are very good points you make about.
Again, thank you for doing this.
So to piggyback on Aaron, and the key is that, yes, the Department of Education can take these initiatives.
Yep.
Not like I have any money, but we could own it.
Right.
But it's better to collectively own a problem in the state versus each individual entity trying to tackle it. And you're right, I might not be the top of the list.
Right.
However, hopefully we all, whatever's on the top of the list helps me piggyback on the bottom, whatever I can pick up on.
Yep. So, I mean, we've got some high-level estimates of how big this problem is, right? And so we've thrown out some numbers of $10 to $15 million per year from 7 to 12 years, right? And again, that's where we need to get to. We need to figure out how big this problem is, because if those are the estimates, the public safety money is not enough money to even solve this problem, right? And so it's a much bigger problem than even that.
Frankly, I can tell you where the priority is. It's all about money. I mean, at the end of the day. And so basically by getting the law passed, we created for ourselves an unfunded mandate. It wasn't handed to us, we created an unfunded mandate. And so now what we're working is, given the leverage potential we have to get private sector money to start to make investments in building out especially the critical middle mile infrastructure, what's going to happen. And I can report that although we can't talk about specifics, a whole bunch of different companies from around the country have shown up having read the law and said they're willing to have a conversation about making investments to implement the missing middle mile infrastructure. So if those become successful conversations, and we're actually able to create a working business relationship in a public-private partnership that causes that to happen, that will in fact kind of turn on the spigot for a bunch of these other, lists of things to start being addressed by other people. So our focus is how do we get the money, how do we get the money deployed in an effective way by private sector partners. The right infrastructure is being built in the right locations to be able to forward this whole event.
So for action steps, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just saying, to Tom's point, we may still need to wrestle with what are the big goals. Because you could argue that the number one goal for this organization is to get universal access across the state. And there are some very remote parts of Arizona, and that is a legitimate question and challenge. Or you can say, I've got a great concentration of students in certain parts of the state who would benefit by a higher drive towards Internet 2 and connection to the land. I mean, there are some major different challenges that I think become the big structural strategic questions that we have to resolve, as opposed to even picking one from each category of the 10 and settling what are the main drivers that we're solving.
You're absolutely teeing up what Mike and Jeff are going to talk about in just a little bit there. So just to wrap up.
Yeah, so, I would encourage you to share your comments. I mean, that's the point of this exercise is that we can all come out with a plan that everyone supports. So whether we carve out time in our next meeting, it's not for another 3 months. So I would read through them, send your comments to us. We'll, consider them, include them, and we're going to continue to work on refining the plan. It's getting smaller and smaller every time we look at it. But that's our work. Our goal is to be able to come back at our next meeting and have a little bit more meat to the plan. But in the meantime, we want to hear your feedback.
And we do recognize the oil of the ocean space in the plan right now.
I think we also plan on having draft outreach plans out to the council.
Yeah. So, one of the things we struggle with a little bit is how much to put out and, for you to consume. I'm not kidding that it's a big plan. And so I think at some point it would be good to just maybe hear your thoughts about how you want to engage in the process. More, you want to see draft versions. I mean, it's a continual work in play. So I don't think we do that right now. I don't think it's stable enough. But it will be soon. And so, we push out an early version. At some point you're going to have to see the whole thing. And so when we do that, we want to make sure to give you enough time before the next meeting to be able to.
I have to confess that the authors can't read through it without falling asleep, so
we're our own worst enemies.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it. Thanks for all the hard work. I'm not going to go nearly as long as Michelle. I'm going to try to keep this really short and give Mr. Evans full time. I'm Alan Pitt. I'm a physician here. A couple of things. First, from Michelle's thing, I'm just putting it out there. When you said fast Jack in the Wall, I just kind of had this vision of Jack in the Box just coming in and out of the wall, and I'm thinking we could maybe use that as a marketing campaign to get adoption. But it's just a thought. It's just a thought.
I'll write that down.
Please. I would tell you that this idea of adoption, which you brought up repeatedly, I think is absolutely critical. And I would make an appeal to some of you who are business leaders in our community that you have an opportunity to actually catalyze that adoption. So that there are business models that make total sense by delivery of healthcare to the desktop that would be advantageous to business leaders, would make this a better business-friendly climate, keep your employees at work, would absolutely give a reason to have adoption. Basically, we can do that. There are ways to do that. And if any of you have thoughts around how to make that happen, Intel, make that happen, Honeywell, make that happen, some of the larger corporate entities in our state where you have a lot of employees and you can control how their care is delivered, I think that would be great to think about. Frankly, as I listened to this, what I heard was a question of, there are multiple business cases in healthcare where if you provided me the infrastructure, I could save you a bunch of money. So employer-based care would be one of them. Nursing home care would be another one, where if I had advanced infrastructure where I could deliver care to the home,
I would save a bunch of money from a different pot, from healthcare instead of technology, something else. And it's almost like I'll pay for the toll road if I'm healthcare if you'll just give it to me. You know, I'll pay you the buck every time to get on the road if I know I'm saving a bunch of money in terms of managing that nursing home patient. If I don't have that toll road, I don't have that opportunity to pay you, well, I'm stuck. I have to use the old provincial municipal route. It's going to take me a long time. So I don't know. There may be ways to think about that. I didn't put some of these together. I'm not smart enough to put some of these together. What I did was I'm a big believer in collaboration. So I reached out to a friend of mine. I'll just bring her up at the end. But I just wanted to cover some of the issues. As many of you know, I emphasize this idea of infrastructure application legislation, this kind of pyramid that you go up and down. And ultimately, legislation is going to define what we can and can't do. So if we don't have legislation in place, it won't matter that the infrastructure is there in healthcare. And so a friend of mine put some of these together just to review them quickly. The federal government is moving forward in many ways. They control the VA system. They're looking at cross-border care. And I think as that goes forward, the idea of a universal medical license will become more and more in the public mind that we should have that as well. This idea of e-pharmacy is a very big deal, particularly for our rural providers. They cannot stand up a pharmacist for some of these smaller pharmacies, and they absolutely need those. I can point at some of those examples in the Midwest where they're already occurring. FDA is now one of the major considerations for any type of mobility. We talk about HIPAA, we talk about FDA. So any of us who are involved in telehealth, you need to start thinking about FDA as well as HIPAA as part of that. Could you advance the slide or do I? Right. Just hit this?
I just did.
Oh, you did. So credentialing and privileging is a major issue. One of the things that has changed now is that the hub hospital, the urban hospital, can control credentialing for these relationships to rural. The problem is it becomes a real mess in terms of what happens if you have a sentinel event at an urban site in terms of communicating that to the rural sites that you've offered credentialing for. And that actually has become one of the biggest bugaboos of all. Reimbursement coverage, as we've talked about in the past, CMS, Medicare, control, innovative project. Again, I want to emphasize that the tools are in-person use cases. So if people have use cases under
The conference has been muted.
we should begin to look at those to see if we can exploit those as use cases on broadband. Next, please. Try it here. I'm pointing in the right direction since you did such a good job. Can you advance the slide? Thank you. One of the things that was a bit disappointing to me of late was that we had a stillbirth. And I used the medical analogy, but we had a stillbirth of legislation. So we had some of the folks down in Tucson try to organize some legislation to move our state forward. And I know many of you are impatient to get some of this done. I would emphasize that we are not ahead of the curve. There are many states now that are moving forward to adopt legislation to make telehealth a more accessible way to care for ourselves. And as you go out and you talk to people, you can say, well, by the way, Arizona's not, cutting on the edge here. There's a bunch of states that are looking at things. We're actually falling behind. And invite the time to look at what does this mean in terms of overall cost savings. Last slide. I just want to give credit to the person who put these slides together. This topic is of enough interest that this was presented to the American Bar Association in the last few weeks. Alexis is a friend of mine, and she's in D.C. She stays abreast of this. I think the time is past where we try to do this ourselves. We want to basically look to domain experts throughout the country and figure out how do we introduce legislation and give confidence and reassurance to our legislatures that they're not bleeding edge, that they're doing things that other people are doing, and we're kind of following along for the betterment of the citizenry. And with that, I'll see if there's any brief questions, but I certainly don't want to take from Mr. Evans' part.
How would one way of converting savings to investment dollars into the infrastructure?
That's a great question, but I can tell you that many of the healthcare systems, if you could provide them infrastructure that was transparent, that they understood the ROI, and they do this all the time. If you say, give me $1 and I'll give you 10 back, and you're using a relevant business case, and I'm Edno, United, or whomever, you may be able to have a relevant conversation where you're saying, I'd like to be able to provide this for you, but it's basically a toll road. You're going to have to pay for some of this, but in return, you're going to have access to things that you wouldn't have otherwise. The last thing, I'll do a plug for the ATX meeting, which is on September 20th. I'm going to be actually leading a panel, and we're going to try to have a broad spectrum across the continuum. Aaron's going to be there as well, looking at solutions in this space. How do you stand up solutions from a technology point of view, from a use case point of view? How does this all roll up into something that we can actually sink our teeth into?
Alan, thank you. And there are flyers at the signing table for that meeting.
Thanks, Alan. At this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Evans, the mayor of the town of Payson, up. Mr. Evans has been the mayor since 2008. He's also the chairman of the Northern Arizona Municipal Water Users Association and is part of the executive committee of the Arizona League of Cities and Towns. He's also president of the
The conference has been unmuted. The conference has been muted.
Tens of thousands in healthcare and nursing scholars.
Thank you. Do I need this back there? Can you hear me in the back? I do need it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that and feel a little intimidated in this room, very frankly. I've got a PhD behind my name, but it's in environmental science, and that doesn't have a lot to do with the medical people and the medical profession you have here. But I've had a unique opportunity over the last few months of experiencing the service delivery program from the other side. And so whether it was an MRI or a nuclear bone scan or a whole lot of things that I knew little about, I've come to know them from a very personal standpoint recently. I'm reminded of a story, I presume it's true because it comes from someone who's now the head of our airport in Payson. His name is General Hunt. Jim was, in his most recent assignment, was the head of the air war in Iraq and Afghanistan, 3-star general. He's now living in Payson, and he tells this story, blended marriage. He and his wife decided to get married, Colonel Hunt. She's a full-bird colonel. They met in the theater of war. They decided to get married, and she had always had this fascination with Africa, and so she talked him into taking her on a safari to Africa for their honeymoon. They make the plans, they get ready to go, and General Hunt finds out that Colonel Hunt had invited her mother. So it was wife, husband, and mother-in-law. About 3 days down there in the dust and the heat and the animals and the noise and the bugs, Jim had just about all of this he could handle, and he gets up one morning on the third day and his mother-in-law's gone. And his wife jumps up and she's scurrying around looking here and there and everywhere and can't find her, and they hear this growling and noise and go up to the top of this little hill and look down into the little valley beyond where their camp was, and here's Mom and this lion rolling end over end and screaming and the most terrible noises you could ever hear. And about that time, she gets up to the top of the hill, looks at her husband in confusion and says, "Aren't you going to help her?" Jim looked down and said, "Listen, that lion got herself into that mess. Let her get herself out." I've learned by good or bad experience over the course of the last few decades to listen more and talk less, and I think he learned that lesson as well. Why Payson? Why me? Give you a very short intro. We don't have a lot of time here, and I appreciate your time. But I believe that we are in the telecommunication business where personal computers were in the late 1980s. We're still in the competition era and not the collaboration era. I think you are part of a process that could help us bridge that. But if we had remained in that competition era, there never would have been the kind of explosion in information and knowledge base that we have today. A rather interesting evolution came when they started establishing ISO standards, because it didn't matter who produced that particular unit. It could fit in that personal computer. If it was a memory chip, you could have it made in Korea, China, South Texas or Arizona, and it would work because you had standards that would allow the interchangeability of it. And I believe that kind of collaboration is going to be essential for us to be able to move forward. Again, White Basin. A few little things. Again, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards. Since I became mayor, we've brought $156 million in grants to Basin. That's nothing for you big guys. But Basin's a town of 20,000. $156 million in grants. We've been able to secure the ear of our national leaders. We have been solicited to apply for grants. We have, and I think many of you have, at least at this table, a grant for, we applied for 29 million, we got 24 million to do what everybody around this table has been talking about. And that's provide a telehealth program for rural Arizona. To Hyman's comment about trying to focus on where the cluster of people is. If you do that, that's where they'll be. Know that they will come. If you provide all the services to Gilbert, that's where people are going to cluster. But I would postulate, as the former president of the Farm Bureau who represented rural counties and rural areas of this state, that the quality of life is more important sometimes, and that quality of life often involves trying to disperse this population to where it can live better. This is coming from somebody who spent 47 years in Yuma and learned to move to Payson, where it's a lot cooler and the quality of life is better. But we don't have all the infrastructure we had in Yuma. Okay, and so if we concentrate that infrastructure, the people will come to where we concentrate it. And is that really better for this state to add more people into an urban bowl where you have to deal with crime and pollution and air quality and water and all the other issues that we deal with? White Basin. In my tenure there, we've initiated several programs. One is the president of the entity that owns the hospital. We're moving forward with many telehealth, not telemedicine. There is a difference, but true telehealth programs. Secondly, we talked about education, and I appreciate Michelle's comments. I appreciate the comments of Mark and Tom, who have to deal with this on a daily basis. We had a young lady 3 years ago who, as an 8th grader, became enamored with the science show that we had. She spent her junior year in Atlanta making some major breakthroughs in breast cancer as a junior in high school because somebody caught her imagination when she was an 8th grader. Education in this world is not about providing facts. You know, I teach an early morning high school class for free, and one of the intriguing things about that class is I ask them a question, most of them have the answer before I can turn around from the blackboard and look at them, not because they're smart, but because they know how to Google, and they have 2 thumbs instead of 1. It's amazing. They have access to the facts. They have access to the facts. Their fingers can fly. I have a grandson who can type 275 certified words per minute because since he was 3 years old, he was on the computer playing.
Bring the mic down a little bit.
Playing games. Okay? He can type really fast. He can do wonderful things on that computer. And he is a dork. Okay? Has no life skills at all. Because along the way, we didn't teach him how to use knowledge to improve the quality of his life. The last thing I want to talk about. We initiated a program nearly a decade ago to bring a 4-year university to Payson. Town of 20,000, we don't need a 4-year university. We have a community college. Why would we do that? A group of businessmen in the community went out and raised about $75,000 and did a higher need education assessment. We survey communities all across rural parts of Arizona and say, what do we need to get students not just to say they want to go to college, but to get through college and back with a degree that would make a difference. And we used that information that we gleaned from that to determine that we had a great disconnect. We have many, many, many very intelligent people who come from rural areas. The young lady that I mentioned is one of those, but we have many others. Our success rate in getting them to come to an urban jungle, adapt socially and academically to an urban environment is very, very poor. I apologize to those who are in the education business, but it's a fact of life. When you have 53% of our Native American tribes whose children say they want to go to college, and you end up with 17% of them going to college, and you end up with 1.1% of them graduating, something's wrong and it's not them. And so we identified what was wrong with the system, and we found that their cultural background, their way of learning was very different than what we were trying to put them in. We were taking a round peg and trying to shove it into a square box, and when it didn't fit, we just hit it harder. We have been able to build this university in Payson that will focus on the needs of those who want a higher education, a world-class education, in a more laid-back, relaxed environment. We've been able to raise $500 million in financing, more than $70 million in donations, and we're in the process now of building this center on 300 acres of the most beautiful land you'll find anywhere in the state of Arizona. The campus will be built with a zero carbon footprint, energy neutral. The students who drive will come, park their car in a high-tech garage, and will walk or ride a bicycle across campus until they leave again at the end of the semester or to go home. The campus has more than 19 key green components that represent most of the major corporate alliance partners from around the world. And our goal is threefold. One, to teach people that true sustainability is not a function of government regulation. It is a function of teaching individuals how to take personal responsibility for their life and their actions. And number two, that sound environmental policy must be based on sound commerce. The day when we can force people to do things by passing one more government regulation is simply running out. And so our curricula will be focused on sustainability as a new curricula. Two, rural health care as a mechanism and a part of what Dr. Pitts was talking about up here. Bringing to the rural communities the opportunity to consult with the very best specialists worldwide in a time-real basis. My own personal situation, we're bringing to make this happen, we're bringing a 1.3 terabyte node to our community so that we can have that kind of broadband capability. As some of the early stages of that program, when I went in for this little procedure that I had done, we had a team at the University of Arizona Medical Center that was to remove the slides, the biopsies, to review the images that were being generated in patients. It took us 20 minutes to get those from patients, coded, cleared, down to the University Medical Center. It took them 3 days to get people back from their summer vacation. So we determined that as a part of this initiative, what we needed to do was look at how we bring all of these divergent pieces together, create standards so they can work collaboratively to bring about a positive outcome and result. And we believe that is the answer, not only for us, but for you, if we're really going to make progress.
Can you talk about the distance learning aspect of the university too?
Yes, the question from Mike was, can I talk about the distance learning? Literally in my briefcase, I got it 10/27 today. We got notice that we had been approved for a $500,000 distance learning grant to help 4 rural high schools in our area come online, not at 3 megabit per second, but at 10 to 50 megabit per second. The goal was there. The money is coming from the Fed. Our challenge again happens to be coming up with the local resources to match the grant money. They want to give you the money, but there's always a caveat or a catch, and we've got to find that grant. We've come up with, I think our part of that was about $140,000. We've come up with all but about $40,000 of that, but that's tough for a rural community to do. Gilbert or Mesa could write that check and probably not even notice it left their bank account. But for us, that's a big deal. And so we're out there struggling to come up with that matching money. The way this will work is we put this equipment into their schools. How many of you have children in high school, grandchildren in high school? How many of them have 3D printers in their schools? We actually have a 3D printer in Payson. The interesting part about that 3D printer, we had to raise about $60,000 to come up with it. But you can lay your hand on it, punch a print, 3 minutes, and 12 seconds later, you pick it up, you blow the dust off of it, and it's your hand. How many of you know what a crescent wrench is?
Come on.
Lay a crescent wrench on their punch copy. 3 minutes, 15 seconds later, the crescent wrench comes out, and it works. You can adjust it. Okay? Problem is, sometimes that crescent wrench adjusts just fine, but there are so many nuts out there that it just won't fit. But as a practical matter, we have one in Payson, Arizona, because we have a forward-looking community that's willing to take at our end and provide the instruments, I'm going to use that term very loosely, the instruments and the technology, the hardware technology, to be able to take advantage of what's out there in the world. Our problem is that middle mile.
Is all this investment translated into cost of an acre of land over the last 3 to 5 years? Have you seen a change in the cost of real estate there?
Has there been a cost in the price of real estate in Payson? Probably like most areas, we saw it dip and we saw it come back. But, with women in business, there's a glass ceiling. With real estate, there's a glass ceiling. And when you get land that's worth $250,000 to $500,000 an acre, it doesn't fluctuate very much depending on what you're doing.
It sounds like you've really stood up the community.
They're using 3D printers also to replicate human body parts.
We've got a head. Not mine, thank goodness. We've got a head that
Replicated ear and stuff like that. There's actually spraying cells and replicating parts of bodies using 3D printers.
These are truly amazing, and it's not the 3D printer I was really talking about as much as it was the fact that we have at our end a very upscale, high-end community that's been willing to come up, been able to come up with the money to make these things happen. But if we don't have that middle mile, people are going to leave our community and go to the Gilberts or the Chandlers or the Phoenixes of the world.
So one of the reasons for inviting Mayor Evans to speak is that if we are able to inspire the rest of the local leadership throughout rural Arizona to do the things he's done, problem solved. We need to replicate, we need to cookie cutter the kinds of energy and the kinds of vision that he's been able to create, communicate, and get funded.
Do you have that type of bandwidth into all your elementary schools, every school?
We will have when we're done with this $500,000 grant. That's not true, I'm sorry. For our middle school and our high schools. So the 4 high schools and the 4 middle schools in the region will have.
You need it in your elementary schools?
We do need it in the elementary. As I mentioned, that's where it starts. This isn't about providing them information. It's about inspiring them to reach forward. One last story. I started life as a migrant farm worker, moved up and down the West Coast harvesting crops with an entire generation that we call poor white trash. Thank goodness, when my little sister got old enough to start school, my dad decided he didn't care about us older boys, but he cared about her enough that we stopped, and we stopped in Yuma. And so we started farming and living in Yuma. And by the time I was still part of my elementary school years, we had a little place. We were working on a tenant farm there in Yuma, and we had a pet chicken named Harriet. And like most who were very, very poor, chickens were good for laying eggs, but at a certain point in their life, you turn the egg-making machine into stew. And so we were, the kids were, in the family, were really worried about Harriet. She had started slowing down laying eggs, so we built her a nest under one of the citrus trees out there in Yuma where we were living, and we'd go steal an egg every once in a while from one of the other hens and put it in the nest. And Harriet would be sitting there, and she'd be clucking and making noise, and my dad was perfectly happy, so we thought we'd got it done. And then one day, much to my chagrin, I think he figured out what was going on because he lined the kids up. Harriet was out there just clucking away, and he said something to the extent, I don't care whether Harriet's sitting or sitting, whether she's laying or a lying, if there's not an egg in that nest when I come back, she's going to be stewing. And he meant it. And I learned a great lesson that day. We spend so much time lying to one another about all the great things we're going to do that sometimes we don't get around to laying the egg. We just want to cackle about what we were going to do. And so my challenge to you, as I said, I'm intimidated by the amount of brain power in the room. If I could do this, we wouldn't need all that bandwidth. Bring all you to face it. But my challenge to you is to think about that. That the goal isn't about conjuring up some new great philanthropic or physical or even commercial scheme. The goal is to produce something. And that product is our future. If we don't reach these young people, if we don't keep people in rural areas having access to good health care, they will move. I promise, even at my age, if I don't have access to good health care, for me, I might choose to continue to live out there in the boondocks. But if I don't have good health care for my wife or my kids, I'm moving to where I can get that good health care. And that's bad for all of us.
Thank you, Mayor. That was awesome. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation from Microsoft on Shaping the Future study. So we have Scott Kennedy and Tony Franklin are going to be presenting.
Yep, absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Scott Kennedy. I'm the Strategic Alliance Manager for Microsoft's U.S. Education team. Sure. Better? Okay, so I'm a Strategic Alliance Manager for Microsoft's U.S. Education team. What that means is it's my job to make sure Microsoft is doing our best to support statewide education initiatives. I essentially sit in the middle of all the groups at Microsoft that touch education. So if you think of our education sales and services teams, our product groups, Microsoft Research, our partners and learning teams, all of these teams, I sit in the middle of them, and I try to drive the coordination and strategy across these groups to make sure we're supporting the education policy goals of the states that I work in, primarily the states across the western U.S. I also have with me today Tony Franklin, who is the manager of our digital inclusion initiatives. He'll be speaking in just a few minutes and sharing some results of an economic impact study that we did along with the ATI Institute to kind of put some data behind the why, put some data behind why we're all here talking about this today and help you understand what the future impact of these efforts may be. You'll hear us throw around the term today, digital inclusion. To Microsoft, when we think about these types of projects, we don't just think about broadband, we don't just think about devices or one-to-one initiatives. We think about it in terms of a holistic digital inclusion strategy that is really all about pulling together public-private partnerships to support broad-reaching, successful, and sustainable digital inclusion initiatives to put devices in the hands of your citizens and connect those citizens to the internet. There's 4 core areas that we focus on, the first being technology access. Next, if we go back to the last one. The first is technology access, and that's kind of the obvious one, connecting folks to the internet and giving them devices to work with. Education outcomes is another. We focus on reducing dropout rates, increasing GPAs, increasing standardized assessment scores, decreasing chronic absenteeism. And we have results from around the world that are showing that digital inclusion initiatives can have an impact on those 4 core areas. Job skills development. We can get a lot of brain power in this room today and talk about what we're going to do to change the future. But if we're not giving folks the skills that they need to take what they're doing on the internet out into the workforce and become competitive in today's workforce, then we're not doing a very good job of what we're trying to do. The last one is economic development. Really what we try to do is drive economic development and growth through education. That's what our digital inclusion programs are all about. Next slide, please. So it's interesting to hear Mayor Evans speak just a moment ago when he mentioned shaping the future. We have a program called Shape the Future, which Tony runs in the U.S. And this program is, again, all about the public-private partnerships that are necessary to create these broad-reaching programs. We look at it in kind of 3 different areas: partnerships, identifying the right groups to bring to the table, convening those groups and making sure that we all understand the goals of each group involved and understand how we're going to move forward and really move the needle in what we're trying to accomplish. The second, the programs, both for Microsoft as well as our partners and your partners as well, to drive digital literacy. We heard Michelle earlier speak about digital capacity and making sure that the people that are using these tools actually have the skills to take advantage of them. We have college and career readiness programs, again, from ourselves and our partners, that we can include in these types of programs to ensure that we're not just putting the devices in the hands of students and walking away. We're making sure that they have the skills to use them. We're also making sure that the educators have the skills that they need to integrate the technology into the classroom and into the curriculum and what they're doing every day. Finally, the IT staff supporting all of these programs as well. The last piece is solutions. So it might surprise you to hear Microsoft talking about pushing technology back in the planning cycle, but that's actually what we would recommend. We would recommend focusing on those first 2 areas first, and then move to solutions where you're focusing on devices, software, connectivity, and making sure that where we started, the idea of putting devices in the hands of students and the citizens in the state is actually where we end up, but it doesn't happen without those two pieces first. So to dig a little bit more into the why, Tony Franklin's going to come up now and speak about the economic impact study that we did along with the ATI Institute and the results of that study.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you to the Council for allowing us the opportunity and the time to speak with you about digital inclusion. I think Scott and Ms. Norton, which I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, you framed the conversation very well when we talk about digital inclusion. I think that we can all agree that it involves more than just putting the wire in the ground. It's all-encompassing in a lot of different ways. Scott mentioned the fact that, partnerships, programs, and solutions. Well, we all agree also that it requires a multi-stakeholder partnership in order to really accomplish the goals that you set forth here today and in the future. As a matter of fact, one of those partnerships that has provided the results that you're looking at currently, ATII, they were the ones that helped us kind of compile the data that you're looking at that will help us quantify the economic impact of digital inclusion in your state. So, without further ado, I'm going to walk through that very briefly, and then we'll end up with the PDF that's right in front of you. So the next slide that we have here, and the model that you're looking at, the study that we've done is based upon a methodology. It was done in the UK, PricewaterhouseCoopers. PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study in the UK based on 13 dimensions of economic impact for digital inclusion. Brought it over here to the US, vetted it through a couple of think tanks, and we whittled it down to about 6 dimensions of economic impact. The first dimension that you see here, of course, is graduation rate. So there's a Federal Reserve study that basically says putting a device in the hands of students increases the likelihood that they'll graduate by 6 to 8%. Again, the model is based off of studies and, of course, information that we've gathered from you. The second assumption in this model is that, of course, students that graduate from high school have a higher potential to go on to college, and, of course, a higher chance of getting a paying job. Once they earn a paying job after graduating from college, they can then contribute to the tax base in a number of different ways, meaning, one, reduced unemployment, two, income tax, sales tax, and property tax, the things that you see behind me. A fourth dimension of economic impact, increased e-health and e-gov. I've been hearing it sitting in the back of the room talking about e-gov, e-health, and being able to quantify how much cost savings are seen when you have citizens that are able to pay their bills online, or to be able to interact with the doctor without needing to travel to that doctor's office. So again, one of the dimensions that really factors into this model is what you see behind me. A fifth dimension of economic impact, reduced incarceration rate. And some people would say these are assumptions. But, you know, assumptions are fine and dandy. We've actually backed up these stats in this study with several reports that are in the back of the PDF file that you have in front of you, so links to all the information that we've gathered. The last dimension that we'll talk about, and then I'm going to hop over to the Excel spreadsheet that will explain it even further. Maybe. There we go. Is the overall impact of digital inclusion. So we've done this study for 5 states and 7 cities in the United States. We've also done this study for over 102 countries around the world. And one thing is clear. There is an economic benefit to digital access or digital inclusion. For the entire U.S., you're looking at a number in the trillions. And for different states, you'll see different numbers here. But let's not talk about the other states. Let's talk about the results of the information that we gathered from Arizona. Not only could you potentially see a lifetime benefit over the lifetime of your students, your working life of your students, somewhere around $32 billion, we can annualize that by about $747 million a year. Now, assumptions aside, let's go into the model, and if we would pull up the Excel spreadsheet so we can talk through it very quickly. I don't want you to get caught up in the Excel spreadsheet that I'm going to show you right now. I'm pulling it up because this is your information. Again, gathered by ACII and then presented to you here today. The model itself, the spreadsheet itself is yours to open, to look at, to understand how the data inputs have gone into that model. We collected about 100 different data inputs to populate the formulas that equal out to the digital inclusion number that you saw, that $32 billion. Of those 100 inputs, along the left-hand side of our screen, you should see some generally understandable or generally available inputs, right? Tax rate. And if we can scroll down just a little bit, you'll see more generally understandable information, such as the population and the population below poverty. For us, digital inclusion, at its current phase, focuses on those students who are digitally excluded. And so we do take a kind of a lean towards the population that's underserved, and calculate that into the actual charts and the graphs that you'll see on the next tab, the one that says dashboard right there. Okay? Again, I don't want the eyes to glaze over. Okay? This is not important for you to memorize. Again, I'm just showing you the data that has gone into the model to calculate the numbers that you'll see in the PDF file.
So is your model such that you could put in a higher penetration of fast bandwidth and higher penetration of different internet connectivity and stuff, and so that you can then kick out the financial value?
There are certain inputs to the model that you can change. And for instance, so a higher bandwidth internet connectivity will potentially cost higher than the proposed connectivity cost, which is actually right here in the middle. So we actually calculated it out at $10 a month over 3 years. But sure, a higher bandwidth cost could be calculated in there and, again, affect the rest of the numbers. And of the 100 inputs that are in the model, all of those can be changed and manipulated based upon how you'd like to use the model to replicate or to look at maybe a certain demographic or a certain population.
Has also been given this model, and we intend to extend it to include being able to answer these questions asked. You know, I don't think there's anyone in this room who doesn't believe that there's value in standing up and such. That's why we're all here. The problem is if I turn to Mark and say, guess what? You should pay for that because it's all fall to education or fall to the Department of Transportation.
Yeah, $740 million.
Yeah, I mean, the problems are that the pockets are empty. And I guess what I would ask is obviously Microsoft would love to have this vertical as a pull-through to sell stuff into. Does Microsoft want to help Arizona stand that up and get that started, or they're just showing us
gee, you guys need to come up with the money? I mean,
No,
it's
actually,
kind of frustrating.
no, and I completely understand where you're coming from. The purpose of Shape the Future as a program is to answer that question that you just mentioned. Sure, no one person in here, no one organization should bear the burden of this actual cost here on their own. So there are ways that we can help. We do have reduced licensing that could dramatically reduce the acquisition cost of the actual devices, and we are a software company, so we can do what we can for software. Partnerships that we can leverage with our OEM partners as well. So getting the lowest cost device, in the hands of your citizens is also an option that we are more than happy to champion and lead, so that you can, we may not be able to write a check necessarily, but by reducing those costs of the things that we have competencies in, I think that hopefully you can see the benefit of that.
I encourage Mark
I'm
thrilled to have a pilot.
I would love to have a pilot, and I work with Microsoft. In fact, I just sent an email to my rep and said, did you know you guys are here? Because I'm pretty surprised, and I've never seen this type of thing from Microsoft. I've been up to, and I've worked with SLC, I worked with the Gates Foundation, I've worked with, I'm in several initiatives with your company, but I've never seen, so take it where Dr. Pitt said, take it from a slide that's telling me I got all this benefit, let's execute it somewhere. Pick a place, pace it. Already motivating. And then give us an implementation plan where we partner together to do this. I mean, it's hard. I mean, I got to punch through all this data, which is exactly what I need. But it doesn't matter because I go to a legislature that has no money.
No money that they'll give up.
Sure.
But I agree with what Kenny said. I mean, it's critical that we get education because it pays off when they become a doctor, or they become an engineer, or they move back to Payson and create a business. This is that's what we're trying to do here. It's not to benefit some educators, it's to benefit our children and move through the system.
Absolutely.
And that's how do we take this from a PowerPoint to action?
Well, I'm glad that you asked. The whole intent of us being here, the whole intent of Shape the Future is to address that specifically. And so, like I mentioned, we've done this for 5 states, 7 cities. Why haven't we done this for 50 states or more?
What's the 5 states?
So we have Florida, we have Arizona, we have Illinois.
You did the study.
Yes, the study. So we've done the study like this for 5 different states, 7 different cities. They're all included in the model. That's to say that we are looking for states that have the same kind of drive and motivation to get to the end point, the end goal. We have the same goals in mind, addressing student need through broadband adoption. Selfishly, we want to hire the next generation of students, the next software developers. So it's imperative for us to support your initiatives. Now, like I said, whether that's software donation, reduced licensing costs, those are all the things that we can bring.
You already do that. You provide education, very good benefits.
Below
I know
the current academic pricing. That's something that I can bring to the table.
So Mark, interestingly enough, we haven't actually done a Shape the Future program in the U.S. We've done it worldwide.
So do it right here in Arizona.
If that's not I'll get to that. Can we hold you to that? Because if we can hold you to that, that will be my
job. We'll get the right people in the room, and it won't be me. I'll be in the chief.
Mark, this is all about starting that conversation.
Yes.
And that could happen in 20 minutes. That's why
I will work, if that's the commitment, if that's the level of commitment.
That's the level of commitment, and I speak to the superintendent right now.
Perfect. Then I will work with Scott to leverage every tool that we have in our arsenal around Shape the Future to provide our piece to the puzzle. Again, we can't do it all, and we want to do it together.
We want jobs in Arizona. We don't, we've got to build an educational workforce so the companies move here so that they can employ our people.
That's why tools like this become a talking point, become a way of all of us agreeing to the fact we need to increase the number of jobs. We need to increase, the broadband access. And through those things, through those other, there are multiple verticals or multiple ways that you can address digital inclusion. The ultimate benefit will be for the students. So, all right, I got it.
What it is you're going to provide. Is it just providing better deals on stuff that they're already getting?
Well, when we look at how we can potentially craft, yes, and it's a deeper conversation about what we can do. Again, I don't want to stand up here and say we're going to write a check. No, but I guarantee you, below anything that you've already gotten, we can provide more.
The key is how do we have a dialogue? Let's first get a dialogue, and then report back to this commission. Because again, it's a start, right? Let's put something into action versus. I like what you said. I loved your story because I agree with the chicken thing. We talk too much about what we're going to do. The government's good about that.
And
Let's do something.
I knew we were being set up when the chicken story came out. And I knew we were going to be set up. But no, that's okay. We welcome, like I said, we welcome the opportunity to work with a state who is saying, we want to do this now. Because we work with many states who say, we want to do this in 2 years. We want to do this in 5 years.
So, Mark, this is a framework, right? Because they were talking about, you have to have your programs. I mean, so we got to line all this stuff up, right? I think this is.
Well, I have the pipeline.
Absolutely. So this is another component to the whole thing. But the thing that we've talked about before, right? Is so back to the testing, right? So how are we paying for that? How are we paying for the extra components, the computers, the broadband? So I haven't seen that plan, right? And so where is that plan, and where are the other affinities that can come in and augment that?
Well, we're local control, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can't tell a district what they're going to buy. I can't go tell a Payson what they're going to get.
Exactly.
But the fact is that we don't have devices out there, and I'm going to roll out an online test that's potentially going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars to put devices everywhere, and nobody's talking about it because it's local control.
Right. So how do we get the local school districts organized in order to have?
Well, I do have an inventory,
right?
Of what they think they have. I do have data because of Park that shows what our deficiencies are, but I can't direct. This state is a very.
So before we run off and go to the superintendent and back to the governor, and we can't answer any questions as soon as they answer.
Well, I need to see the questions he wants to answer.
Right. Yeah. I think we need to take some time. We need to go through the data. We need to look at it, because last thing I want to do is be embarrassed in front of the governor.
Well, I would like to get there first.
Yeah.
I'll be embarrassed.
You'll go embarrassed first. I appreciate that.
Aaron, as we built the strategic plan, we were able to gather some global impact statistics, some national impact statistics, but this is really the first model we've had, and I like your very first phrase was assumptions aside, comma, everyone can challenge the assumptions, but without a base tool, it's hard to even talk about it.
Exactly.
So thank you. We're glad to slide in to the program. John Kelly brought us the opportunity, and it is interesting work. Assumptions can always be challenged, but we haven't had a tool like this to even work from before.
Can you send us a soft copy?
We love that. Yeah, and so we'll make sure to
Well, I'm sure my time is over. So you'll have the spreadsheet. You'll also have the PDFs in a soft format. And please, we welcome that conversation to move forward.
Well, you got to start the conversation.
Absolutely.
And by the way, we can't isolate the smaller communities with this because we also have the data that they needed at smaller and smaller areas. We figured that it about 100,000 person area is probably about 6 million. We can apply the model regionally. We can apply the model regionally.
Who did the data collection on this? How did you get it?
CII and
did you use the broadband inventory to do that?
We use Census 2010. We use stuff from various executive branch departments.
Wherever the data was.
Thank you very much. Absolutely. So 2 agenda items left. Mike, do you want to give us an update on the community broadband planning at school and prioritization matrix?
Sure. We're going to do this very quickly, but basically part of what we're engaged in right now is the early stages of an outreach to the rural communities in Arizona. And we decided some time back to use the councils of government as the kind of centralizing agencies. They already have relationships with their subtending communities and with the political groups within the communities, and they also have a relationship with ADOT because they are one of the principal local planning entities that ADOT uses to plan highways.
So part of what we've asked these groups to do is to stand up a committee that not only thinks about new highways, but thinks about new digital highways and where do they want them, where is their missing middle mile capacity, what can be done.
They want to use the microphone.
Oh, good. Thanks. What can be done to do that? The second thing that we've done is that we have begun to create a decision matrix. This is very preliminary, so there's going to be a lot of input and probably a lot of changes. But we wanted to decide basically based on highway segments. We found that to be kind of the interesting measurement tool. A stretch of highway from point A to point B that has a certain number of communities within 20 miles of that highway so that we can reach those rural communities using wireless technologies from fiber that would be built along the highways. And so these set of criteria determine which highway segments might become priorities, both for local communities and from the standpoint of the Digital Arizona program itself. One of the things that we believe that the decision matrix will do is it will lead us to wind up using various kinds of calculations with ROI, return on investment estimates for the private sector, as to which highway segments have the greatest likelihood of being a good place to start actually making investment dollars and to begin building new capacity. And we have tentatively said that there's going to be probably three priorities, one in which there's a very good ROI calculation from the standpoint of private sector providers, one in which is more mid-range and more problematic, and then one in which no amount of calculation is going to show that there's a good ROI to build out to those communities. And so each of those will drive kind of different funding decisions and different mechanisms for dealing with how do we actually find to get the infrastructure to all of those locations. I'm going to go on to the next slide. So how that breaks down is that there is an economic impact, which is basically a set of softer measures, and that's things like what kinds of gaps are there in being able to deliver digital curriculum and online testing and real-time feedback of student performance and those sorts of things in the case of the educational sector, or telehealth improvements and general economic development in along a particular highway segment. Another one down in the second group is again the ROI calculations, and there are issues like, for instance, who owns the road segment. In many cases, the Department of Transportation does own it, so we can essentially get free access to the rights-of-way along that particular highway. But there's other places where there are underlying easement constraints that actually make it difficult to get access to that right-of-way along the highway. And finally, the highway segment issue around technology. We began to realize that communities were thinking, well, I want to advocate for having these three communities along this particular highway built first. We had to make the point, because they weren't getting it, that if you're not within reach of Tier 1 internet access capacity, it makes no sense to build a segment of highway further away from that can't actually connect to the internet at super high speeds. So it's going to work like a fan out from the Phoenix metro area and the Tucson area and to a more limited extent Flagstaff, in which you have to build first where you can actually connect to Tier 1 capacity, and then the second tier is where you connect to that, and so on. And then the last one is a high-level goal that we've had for some time, which is the notion that as we start to make decisions about where to build middle mile capacity or to advocate for building middle mile capacity, we would like to start closing sonnet rings such that we create a much more resilient, fail-safe network throughout the state, and to advocate for standards and service level agreements that would encourage and support providers deciding to interconnect their networks in a standardized way such that one network can back up another network when there's a problem with a particular segment of the highway. This led us to some 45 data points that we need to start to collect by road segment, and to begin to start to rank those and tier those to provide decision-making support criteria for the local planning communities that are now agreeing to do this. And by the way, all 4 of the rural COGs have agreed to stand up committees and to begin to do this work, so they've all bought in.
So we can also grab a lot of this information off of our maps.
Yeah, so there's 2 tools, and I want to move on to that, Jeffrey, if we can, that we're creating besides this decision matrix.
So this was our chicken story, right? So we don't even know how much to ask for. right? We don't even know how much has to happen in year one. We don't even know which highway segment's more important than the next one, right? So this is, how do we start to prioritize this? How do we start to build out a roadmap? Is it going to take us 1 year? Is this going to take us 50 years, right? Because today we don't know. We can sit around this room, we can come up with all the most brilliant ideas in the world, but until we start to prioritize and come up with some type of methodology to have the conversation, we don't even know where to start.
We have to start talking about real engineering criteria. For instance, building in northern Arizona through granite rock is an entirely different proposition in building middle mile than building, through sandy soil in southern Arizona. So one of the things that's happened, by the way, as a result of the digital highways bill passing, is all of a sudden we're having a bunch of people showing up from around the country with bucks in hand that are saying, we really like this law. We think it's leading the nation in terms of public-private partnership ideas, and we want to start sitting down and having conversations about specific highways, specific road segments, and specific projects where we can find ways to make an investment, but also to benefit from the availability of the assets, the state-owned assets. So we want to show you one of the tools that we developed is now on our website, the Digital Arizona website, which is digitalarizona.gov. You go to the Maps button on the home page and select the Arizona broadband map.
We just had faster.
Yeah, we have a broadband gap.
And you provide it to the state.
So,
kind of fix your wireless.
I know. We are going to fix the wireless.
That's the hardware.
Is it okay?
Ooh, that's even scary. That's scary. Let's just stay with the wireless contact.
Steve Jobs said
there we go. Okay. So you go to the Maps page, and then you select the fully interactive Arizona broadband map, and then you scroll down and you select the community broadband planning map. And when you click on that, there are YouTube videos that we have created to show people how to actually use the tool. So we're going to play the overview video about how to actually use the tool. You can get just a quick sense of what kinds of things are possible with the new tool. Okay. And this tool was created by Tapas Das in the Land Department, and it's proven to kind of blow people away.
Welcome to the Arizona Broadband Community Planning Map. The following Watch and Learn series of video tutorials will walk you through a set of tasks showing you the scope and functionality of this web mapping application. After watching these videos, please read through the online Quick Start Help Guides to learn step by step how to perform some specific tasks. You will learn how to locate and zoom to an address or zoom to a specific zip code and find all the wired broadband providers like fiber, DSL, T1, and cable within a census block. You will find how to display the results in a table and export the data to Excel as a comma-delimited file and make presentation quality charts. You will learn how to find the population and housing data of your census block and list all the wired and wireless broadband providers, including satellite broadband. You will learn how to make instant charts displaying the total population, average median age, number of households, average household size, and acreage. You will find how to select multiple census blocks and display the broadband information. You will learn how to use the powerful spatial analysis tools within this web mapping application. You would see how easy it is to locate all the schools or libraries within your zip code or any study area that you draw on the map. Once you have located, say, a library, you can easily identify all the schools that fall within a 2-mile radius and list their broadband information. You can chart out the population and housing data within this buffer and display all the broadband information within this zone. You can draw and measure objects on the ground and find, for example, how far your community is located from a central office or a major highway. You can even select and display the broadband footprints of any broadband provider in Arizona. You can easily display map layers showing the cable coverage or display the populated areas having census blocks with 1 or more dwelling units, or view the maximum download speed and number of broadband providers. We hope these tools help you as a planner to make better broadband decisions for your community. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Now, one of the things we're doing with this tool is that we are actually using federal grant dollars to pay for consultants to go out and actually work with the communities and teach their local planners, their regional planners and community planners, how to use the tool. We also intend, as I mentioned earlier, to start to integrate this tool with the Microsoft tool that you heard about earlier so that we can get even more powerful demographic information combined with broadband information. And the last step that we're taking, within a week or so, we're going to be announcing on our map a speed test capability coupled to a survey. And we're sending out emails to all of the directors of state agencies and local government agencies and asking them to ask their employees to go home and run that speed test. Certain technologies are actually very accurate in terms of the advertised speed rates, a la cable, for instance, is typically there, and the actual speeds that people experience. Other technologies don't have that same match. So one of the things that we're attempting to do is to find out what's really so about what kinds of speeds people are actually experiencing as opposed to the advertised rates. And we're going to do that at a large enough sample level, our intention is anyway, that will have real statistical significance when we make those comparisons as well. So,
are you going to take this to like principals in the schools? I mean, we need to take it to that level.
Absolutely. And of course, we need your help because we know.
All right, we'll get the letters written.
Good, okay.
Because if there's one, then it's in your database?
Yeah. So, you know, this is to a point you've made, Mark, many times too. Data-driven decisions really work. And so that's where we're trying to go, is to get really accurate data to help us make these kinds of decisions, help communities make these decisions.
We'll do a marketing blast to get the help. Very good. Teachers at home and in their school.
That's right. So that keeps us off the streets. This kind of
looking
stuff.
for 100,000 points almost immediately. We can find 100,000 points and we can cover.
There's 650 LEAs and how many schools do we have? 57,000 teachers.
And then to get the kids to help the parents.
So, Michael, thank you very much.
Very good.
Good stuff. We're definitely trying to push this along and trying to get a lot more tactical. You know, that's really the next step. I think we've got a good high-level strategic plan. We need to start to create those initiatives from that. But how do we start to figure out exactly what we can do? And it will take data to help us with that. So, last item on the agenda, Mike is going to give us an update on ATIC.
Thank you, Aaron. This is only going to take a few seconds. I'll be very brief. I'm Mike Whipple, the chair of ATIC. If you don't know what ATIC is, just turn to your neighbor because they know. I very much appreciate Mayor Evans's call to start production. And that's what my message is here today, is there is a really big production coming up within the first 2 weeks of November. This is going to be a production that helps spread the message of the Digital Arizona Council and what's going on with the Digital Arizona project. And this will occur, as I said, in mid-November. We don't have the ATIC is producing it for you. We don't have the location determined yet. It's going to be much bigger than a little bit bigger than the event that the telemedicine and telehealth program in September, which, by the way, you can get more information on the table out front here. And the other piece was that I really appreciated Mayor Evans again bringing up was that this is the era of collaboration. That's the purpose of this really large production, which will also, not everybody will be able to attend the large production that will occur here, probably in Phoenix. But for the ones who are not able to attend, we do intend to have some regional productions out in various locations of Arizona. And I was thinking, Mike Golden, that maybe we could use Mayor Evans for warming up the crowd. We can have a conversation about that. Sure. It'll be a short one, but we can have fun.
Well, I mean, he just does it for himself. I don't get bullshit. I don't book it.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Excellent. Any other questions or comments or items from the board? Okay. Jeff, did we have any comment cards? Okay, excellent. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much. Oh, sorry, back there. Sorry, say that again.
I didn't have a hard time. And I don't have reliable internet.
Right.
And, you know, I've been working with Centrelink, I've been working with Fox, but neither of them want to expand. Whatever is
To get that kind of information into our database, you need to go to a Wi-Fi location somewhere at a restaurant or a hotel or what have you, and just get on the site and tell us. There's a place to click and to tell us that you have a particular address and you're unable to get internet service at that address. Or you could mail us a letter, but I forgot how to do that.
Excellent. All right, thank you all very much.
Rob, good seeing you, man. Good to see you. Yep, that's right. Yeah.